My name's Steve Mastroianni. I'm an artist here in the Northeast Ohio area. In addition to being an exhibiting artist, I'm a photographer, college professor, sometimes musician, radio programmer, a whole bunch of different things. And the name of this show is Diagrams for Inner Space. So this work is sort of a hybrid of photograms and drawings, sort of an intersection of those processes. And by photograms, I mean cameraless photography. That's where I'm using photographic materials like light-sensitive emulsions, such as cyanotype or silver gelatin. But instead of using a camera or an enlarger to create those images, I'm putting objects directly on the photosensitive emulsion and creating sort of a reverse shadow. So we take the camera out of the equation. That's why we call it cameraless photography. There's a lot of drawing involved. All of these ideas come from ideas that are drawn out in a sketchbook. So I will sketch out lines, patterns, designs, and then think about how I can sort of recreate them on a larger scale in the photograms. So the drawing, this is simply a drawing on black paper. It's done with iridescent ink. And that ink has a peculiar quality that when you draw it onto black paper, it appears very bright and white, sort of silvery. But if you draw it onto white paper, it appears very dark. So it has a sort of reversal process that kind of reminds me of the silver gelatin process, which is why I like to use it. But this is strictly a drawing. Right behind me, this is what we call a cyanotype. And a cyanotype is a very old photographic process. From the mid-1800s. It's a very simple photographic process. It takes two iron salts, and when they're combined, these two different iron salts become sensitive to ultraviolet light. So we mix up the solution, not in daylight, like inside under incandescent light or in a dark area, apply it to the paper. Then once it's dry, we place objects on top of the paper and then bring it out into the sun or an ultraviolet light source. And that exposes the emulsion. So anywhere that you see a white area or a lighter area is an area that was blocked by some object or cut out pattern or something like that. Anywhere where you see blue was fully exposed to the light. So it's sort of like a reverse shadow. This is also a photogram, but this is a silver gelatin print. So this is a traditional darkroom process. The paper, it's a manufactured paper, and it has a silver gelatin coating that's sensitive to light. So this is the kind of material that you only handle in the darkroom under a red safe light. And it's the same basic principle. If I put objects on top of the paper and expose it to light, those objects will block out the light and become light. Areas that are not blocked out will become dark. So after I put the objects on there, expose it to light, then I process it with the chemistry, develop the paper, and then fix it. And again, we get sort of this reversed image. Most of this work comes from a very sort of abstract, imaginary, dream-like influence. So there's a lot of influence from the surrealists and things like automatism and synesthesia. That's where you hear or see things that inspire other visual ideas. For instance, seeing words and letters that then you associate with colors, or hearing sound or music that you then associate with lines or patterns. So it's very much of an internal process that's sort of abstracted and then sort of put out into these different lines and motifs that kind of create different sort of symbols and meanings. A lot of it is up to the viewer. I have my own ideas about where these things come from, but it's mostly abstract ideas. A series of pieces actually started from a gallery show that I was asked to be in a few years ago. And the theme was sticks and stones. So there were several different artists. There were sculptors and painters and different media, conceptual artists, all exploring this idea of sticks and stones. And the curator called me because he wanted a photographer to contribute. So he was thinking, oh, there'll be like, still lifes of sticks and stones. That's the kind of this sort of thing. And I was thinking to myself, I've been wanting to make these photograms for a long time, so why don't I take those sticks and stones and put them on the paper? So instead of making photographs, I started laying them out on the paper. So that's how this whole body of work started. So diagrams are inner space at the Summit Artspace up through September 14th. I hope you have a chance to come down and see these in person, because when you see them on social media, on my Instagram site, they're like these little thumbnails, and they really don't do justice to like how huge these things are. These are like, they're almost life-size. They're like the size of a person. They're really, really massive pieces, and if you can get up close to them and sort of get immersed in them, I think you'll see them in a much different light, a much better light.